name's Kevin Spire. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa, and I am a member of the Iowa Genealogical Society. And today we're going to talk about Genealogy Basics. These are the topics that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start off with some 5 basic rules of genealogy, just kind of a fun way to get things started, the conversation started. Then we'll get into where do I start, where to find information, and what to do once you get there, where the information is at. Some common record types to use for your genealogy research. We'll talk about some warnings and some pitfalls, some problem areas. And then at the end, we'll get into documenting and organizing. We'll talk about paper versus electronic, and some options there to consider. So first off, I'd like to start just a little bit kind of with a welcome and maybe find out a little bit about you folks in the room, who you are, where you're from, what started your interest in genealogy, and what it is that you might hope to learn here today. And I'll be the guinea pig. I'll go first. My name is Kevin Spire. I live in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm originally from Iowa City area, but my family is all from Tama County, which isn't very far away from here. So I spent a lot of holidays and Christmases and all that coming up here to Tama County to spend time with the family. What started my interest in genealogy, you know, I kind of have to peg it to photography. When I was a kid, I enjoyed photography a lot, and for some reason, I ended up being the one that collected photographs from people. And I ended up getting a lot of wedding pictures of ancestors, of all these old people, you know, and I was like, who are these people? And how am I connected to them? And I just kept getting these pictures, and that kind of spawned my interest in finding out more about my family and my family history. And then what I hope to learn today, I always learn something at these classes that I do. Sometimes it's just through your enthusiasm and your interest or something that you share, but I always come away learning something from it. Let's move on ahead here, and let's start off with talking about some of our basic rules of genealogy. So our first one here is everyone was a beginner once, and even experienced researchers are still learning new things. So really what's behind here is don't be shy. Jump in. Don't let it intimidate you. You know, going and digging into these records, they might seem kind of odd or unusual or not sure what you're going to find out of them, but just jump in. Start digging into them and looking to pull some information out. We're going to look at some examples in a few minutes, and I'll get you started. But once you start digging, then it gets hard to stop, is what ends up happening. And like I said, even experienced researchers are learning new things. There's always new stuff coming up. There's new records that are being digitized and made available. And you know, the whole DNA thing hasn't been around really all that long. And some people are just starting to get familiar with how can I use DNA to help my research and that type of thing. So there's always new stuff coming on. Number 2, there are no such things about family secrets, just things we don't talk about, right? So I have this slide in here just kind of as a reminder that there are some topics out there that might be a little bit sensitive in your family tree. And maybe you know about some of them, maybe you don't. Maybe you might stumble into something, I don't know. But be prepared for that type of information and kind of think about how you might want to approach it and how you may or may not want to share it, depending on what it is. All right, number 3, family lore can be tangled, but it often contains nuggets of truth. So I've heard these before. My great-great-grandmother is full-blood Cherokee. Is she? Could be. I don't know. It might be, might not be. Or my great-great-great-grandfather is part of royalty in England. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. That's part of what the journey is in figuring these things out. But I tell you what, even if you find out that they aren't as true as you thought they were, it's often that there's some related story. Maybe that great-great-great-great-grandfather wasn't descended from royalty, but maybe he worked in the castle and did some type of work for the royal family. Or maybe that great-great-great-grandmother isn't 100% Cherokee. Maybe she grew up near a reservation or had friends who were part of the reservation. I don't know. But there's often some nugget of truth that's buried in that, so it's worth exploring and writing those things down so that you can check them out. Number 4, you need to be flexible in the spelling of names and ages of family members, that type of thing. So this is important. Don't get so hung up on spelling when you're looking at these documents. Remember that a lot of these documents that we're going to be talking about were written by someone else based on how they heard the name pronounced to them. And if they were coming off the boat and that person said their name in a very heavy or thick German accent or French accent, that person probably wrote it down very quickly as he heard it. You know, my name, Spire, S-P-I-R-E, I can't tell you how many ways I've seen it spelled. S-P-I-E-R, S-P-Y-R-E, S-P... There's whole variations. And you want to look at those and consider those when you're searching for your records to make sure you can find the person that you're looking for. And then number 5, everything is not on the internet, and imagine this, not everything on the internet is true. Oh, shocking, right? So just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's fact. You've got to take things with a grain of salt. So we're going to look at some examples a little bit later of people's family trees who are posted on the internet. And if it's up there, it must be true. Not necessarily. They may not have done the due diligence that they needed to do to prove what their research is showing and advertising. You just can't take it at face value. You need to do a little bit of digging there to back it up. All right, so enough of that. Let's get in. So how do I get started? That's what we're here to talk about here. Where do I get started? So unfortunately, I work in corporate America, and in that world, it's all about setting goals, right? And you know, it's not really a bad thing to think about a little bit. So I broke this down into 2 areas. First, personal goals. Why are you doing this? Why are you investing your time? I mean, your time is your most valuable asset, right? Maybe you want to verify that family story. Did great-great-grandpa really descend from royalty? I want to put that to bed and figure it out. Or maybe you want to join a lineage society like the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Mayflower Society, some of those organizations, and you have to prove your lineage back to that event. Maybe you just want to learn more and you want to pass it on to other generations, your kids, your grandkids, something like that. Those are all good reasons, and there's more. And then you might want to think about your research goals. And what I mean by that is thinking about the extent of your research and how broad you're going to go. So, and what are the targets you're aiming at? So maybe one of your research events or research goals is to trace an event from your ancestor's life. For instance, I did one where I wanted to know who was it that the first Spire that came to Iowa and settled here. Why did he come? What were the struggles that he had getting here? And how did he live? And that was a little research goal that I had right there, was to figure that out. And I explored that. Maybe you want to create a cohesive family story to share. You know, maybe you want to put a book together, type of thing. to talk about where our family came from and how we got here. Think about the boundaries of the extent of your research. So this thing can mushroom pretty fast. You know, you start with you and mom and dad and their parents and their parents. How far out do you want to go? Do you just want to follow your direct bloodline of ancestors? Do you want to go out to all the aunts and uncles and their children and those children and on down? How do you want to focus it? Because it can get kind of overwhelming if you don't kind of put some parameters around it. And then think about how you want to organize and present the information that you've found. Like I said, you might want to put a book together, or maybe you want to do, maybe you're real computer savvy, you want to put a little video together or something like that. There's all types of things that you can do. I find that my goals change frequently. They're frequently changing. But it's a good thing to kind of focus in on real quick at the beginning. So, where do I start? I always say start with what you know best. That's key number one. Anyone know what I mean by that idea? What do you know best? Parents? Yeah, that's a good start. I'd even back up one more step and start with yourself. That's a good place to start, right? And start collecting and gathering together that basic framework information. And what I mean by that is birth date, birth location, marriage date, marriage location, death date, death location. And of course, if you start with yourself, you're not going to have the death information in there. But for these other folks, those are the three pieces. BMD, birth, marriage, death, dates and locations. That's the basic framework to create your family tree. Now we'll get into, there's more to kind of flesh it out from there, but that's the basic framework to get started. So start with yourself, and I'd say then that the next, we'll call it the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff, your spouse, if you have one, get your spouse's information, same thing. Name, full name, of course, birth date, birthplace, marriage date, marriage location, and if they've passed away, then death date, death location. And then next kind of low-hanging fruit, your children. You can probably get that pretty quickly and put that together. Maybe if there are grandchildren, that's another quick item that you can get. And you're not going to need records for this because you know it, right? You've experienced it. Then once you've got those descendants done like that, then I'd start going up the tree from there. And then move on to your parents. Same information, birth, marriage, death information for them. Then maybe your siblings. And after that, grandparents, aunts and uncles. The idea here is to kind of work one generation at a time. It's very easy to get distracted when doing this, let me tell you. There's always that shiny object over here of information and you want to go grab it. Trust me, that shiny object has been there for a long, long time. It's going to be there later for you when you're ready for it. But just kind of a structured approach here to work generation by generation so that you'll have some accomplishment and be able to move forward. Oral history. Oral history, an important part here of something that's easily overlooked. But if you have older relatives that are still around or older folks that knew your ancestors, get with them. Get that information from them while they're still with us and while they're still clear of thought that they can share it with you. This is the money, you know, so to say. This is the really valuable stuff that helps to flesh out those stories. Talk to them about their experiences, their recollections, their impressions. If they're comfortable with audio-visual recordings, that you can do it, do it. You'll be glad that you have the sound of their voice when they're not around to share it anymore with you. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, be respectful of sensitive topics. If there's an area there that something a little sensitive, be prepared, figure out if and how you want to deal with that with them. Those memories are still just as fresh today as they were when they occurred, many of them. All right. Then let's stretch out a little bit further here. Let's talk about local resources. So these are a few local resources that I'd mention here. The local library, county courthouse records, church records, cemetery, genealogical and historical societies are just a few local places to consider information, where information can be found. So I like to focus a little bit on public libraries because I think they're underutilized a lot. This is where the local information is housed and where you can find local information. It may not be called genealogical section or historical section. It might be city and town information or some other name, but a lot of them have microfilms of newspapers. They might have publications of local historical groups or genealogical societies available. And if you're talking about a library in a small town, sometimes those small town libraries aren't in existence anymore. You know, my family is from Garwin, not too far away. There's no library there anymore. There used to be when my mom was around, but for that collection, it may have moved to the county seat. So I might go to the library at Toledo to go see if that Garwin information is housed over there. And remember interlibrary loan. A lot of the libraries have that. You know, if you find out there's a book or something you want down at Des Moines, they can, no cost, have it shipped to another library for you to use. And then, of course, genealogical and historical societies. So a lot of these organizations, they have great collections of books. They have libraries of their own. Books that are no longer in print anymore. You can't buy them on Amazon. You have to go someplace else to find them. Or sometimes they have these little books that are created by other genealogical organizations. At the Iowa Genealogical Society in Des Moines, for instance, there's some little binders I'm thinking of that in some faraway county in Iowa, someone walked a cemetery and they walked down or wrote down all the headstones there. So now I don't have to travel all the way over to the other side of the state. I've got some reference information here that I can check out. So that's what I mean by rare and out of print items. They have some specialty items that are available. Some societies may not have their own brick and mortar building. In this day and age, it's harder and harder for them to support those type of buildings, and these organizations have often merged, or they've grouped with others, or maybe their collections housed at a local library or a historical building. The most valuable thing these places have is that last bullet there, members that can help you with your specific problems. These folks have already been doing this type of work. They can help you. They can give you some guidance. They've been struggling with probably the same type of things that you've been struggling with. So talking with them, getting involved, they can help you. You can't get that on the internet. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't focus a little bit on the Iowa Genealogical Society. If you go out and Google our name, this is what the banner looks like on our homepage. And if you come to visit us, this is what the front of the building looks like in Des Moines. It's not far off of 235. We're just a couple blocks west of the state capitol on Grand Avenue. We're open 6 days a week. A little later on Tuesday and Thursday nights till 9 p.m., but other days we're open till 4, Monday through Saturday. Admission is free for members. If you're a visitor and you're not a member, you can become a member when you walk in the door, of course, or it's a $10 a day usage fee. I do have some membership applications with me if you're curious and want to take one with you and have some details there about that. Single, for an individual, annual membership is $35, and for a family, it's $45 a year. Both of those are yearly. And here's what the library has: all kinds of books, like I mentioned, microfilms, records from across the United States, not just for Iowa, also some European collections. We also have vertical files of other family research that's been done that you might be able to tap into. We have access to Ancestry.com that's free on the computers there. We're also an affiliate of the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. So if you've ever been out to the FamilySearch.org website, which is the website that's managed by these folks, sometimes when you're looking at records, it'll say, you know, you can browse them and look at them. Other ones might say, nope, you're blocked. You have to go to an affiliate library to look at this record. So if you come to either a place, a station at one of the churches of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church, some places will have viewing areas where you can look at them, or you go to an affiliate library like us, and you can view it on our computers, or bring your own laptop and go through our Wi-Fi, and they'll recognize it and you can see it there. Your membership also offers you reduced costs on educational classes every month, reduction on admission for 2 genealogy conferences each year, special interest groups. We have a German interest group, a Norwegian interest group, an Irish interest group, a DNA interest group. If you like DNA, want to know more. And then, of course, volunteers to help you with that experience. So a lot of things offered there. Let's stretch out a little bit further and talk about the State Historical Society of State Historical Society of Iowa Library. This was their web page, or their banner page, a while back when the caucuses were going on. But there's a little link up there for libraries. That's what I've got circled if you want to see about their library collection. Where are they located? You know that picture I had of IGS, or the Iowa Genealogical Society? I turned directly around and took the picture of this, the State Historical Society building. So we are directly across the street from one another. We send people back and forth often looking for records. The east side, which is where that building is pointed, is where the library is located at to view the records. The west side is where all the exhibit halls and that type of thing is at.
Can you go back to the website?
Sure. Yeah. www.iowahistory.org, or if you just Google State Historical Society of Iowa, you'll find it. So I mentioned the library location in Des Moines. There's also one in Iowa City. Their hours, a little bit challenging sometime, 9 to 4:30, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. This last thing is something that catches people. They're closed on that Saturday when the following Monday is a holiday. So Labor Day falls on a Monday. They'll be closed the prior Saturday. Trips some folks up. What do they have there? They've got everything for the state of Iowa. They have the vital records beginning from 1880, the birth, marriage, and death records. They have all kinds of books and periodicals. They have census, both state and federal census records, government records, newspapers. They have an awesome map collection in there, wonderful maps. And of course, all the original documents for Iowa government history, going back to Robert Lucas and when we were just a territory, are all housed there. They also have free access to Ancestry.com at the Des Moines location. If you wanted to go on a little bit of a road trip, go check out some other libraries in the U.S. These are some libraries that house genealogy collections or genealogy information. They're focused on genealogy. Mid-Continent Public Library in Independence, Missouri, really not that terrible far away down there, but they've got a great facility, all focused on genealogy. You can check out their website. Just Google them, and you can see what their facility looks like. The Allen County Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana is another big resource there. And then the Family History Library that's managed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City, Utah. This is what I call the mother lode of records for genealogy. They've been doing it for centuries. They have a lot of stuff there. And then our own Library of Congress. And you know, the website for the Library of Congress has a lot of information there. And some of that is for intra-library loan. You can get some of it sent to your local library if you want. When you go to the library, talk to the librarian and the volunteers. Don't be scared of them. They're not nearly as scary as this little gal right here. She looks pretty timid. Even if it's a small library, ask them for a little tour to get yourself oriented and tell them what you're there for. Who knows what secrets and little gems they might know about in the library to help you out with your time while you're there. Ask them about their policies for making copies. Some of these places, this is how they make their money. And you know, it might be a real hassle to dish out a quarter all the time for it, but this is how they make their money. Also check on policies for using laptops and Wi-Fi access. This day and time, most places it's not an issue, but sometimes the older facilities, they might be sensitive to that or, you know, want to know. All right, let's keep stretching out a little bit further from the libraries. How about the internet? We've all been there, right? It's convenient. You can do it at home, in your pajamas at 2 a.m. in the morning with your coffee or your rum and Coke or whatever you want, you know. There's a lot of websites. They're free. Some of them cost money. You have to have subscriptions to them. There's lots and lots of websites and information out there. And something I like to point out are instructional videos. Go check out YouTube and do a search on genealogy. Sometimes there's little videos. They're only 3 minutes. Some are 20 minutes, some are an hour. And you know, you might realize that I got to go to work in the morning. You know, I got to get off the computer. But these little videos are kind of handy and interesting to check out. Lots of stuff on the internet. Another option is hiring a professional. Now that might sound a little dry, and it might sound like it takes some of the fun out of it. But sometimes in your research you get stuck and you need some help, or you need a little push or a little nudge. It's something to consider, and there are local professionals that are available. Just go do some Google searches. And my advice is always buyer beware. Be sure to be asking the person before you send them money what you're going to get for what you're paying for and what you can expect. And maybe ask for some of their past research to see if they're willing to share examples or samples. Okay, let's get into some of the goody stuff, right? You know, some of the materials here. Let's talk about some of the records and the basic building blocks. So we're going to take a look at census records, both federal and state, vital records, the birth, marriage, and death records, and some of the family documents and stories. So census records, these are the basic building blocks for your research. You're going to want to locate your family in every census possible that you can, because each census has a little bit different piece of information with it. Every 10 years a census was taken, some information is pretty standard and repeatable, but other questions varied a little bit. So it adds a little bit more each time the census was taken. Of course, there's always limitations, right? There's always those things that aren't there. Some of the information can be inaccurate. Like I said, census takers were writing it down for what they heard. And if they heard it from, mom and dad wasn't home and they got it from the 13-year-old daughter to fill in the names and the ages and everything, might not have gotten it all exactly right. Some families were missed. These census takers, when they were walking, they went back so many times, and if the families weren't there, they gave up, and it happens. This is the thing I have the most trouble with, is handwriting illegible or faded. Unfortunately, they are what they are. It's just, that's what it is. If you're computer savvy and you can get an image and maybe kind of darken or lighten or use colors on it to filter it, sometimes it helps bring things out a little bit more. Or if you have photo software that can enhance, sometimes that helps. But it's just kind of what it is. And if you're looking at transcriptions or indexes, sometimes there's errors in there. If you're not looking at that original error, or original record, you're relying on a transcription of the record or an index, there might be an error in that. Like I was saying, the spelling of the names. If someone has created an index and they spelled Smith always S-M-I-T-H, and you're really looking for S-M-I-T-H-E, and you're restricting your search criteria by just looking for it with an E on the end, you might want to think about some alternate spellings when you're doing your searching to pick up those names. All right, we're going to talk about some federal census records. So, the federal census was taken every 10 years beginning in 1790. Unfortunately, the 1890 census was destroyed in fire. There are some very, very small fragments left, but it's pretty much gone for 1890. Privacy laws closed them for 72 years from the public. They are not available to the public until 72 years after they were taken. So the last census that became available was the 1940 census, was made available in April of 2012. That means the 1950 census is going to be available in 2022. It's really not that far away. It'll be here. We'll have the 1950 census available. The census is organized by state, and then it goes in. State to county to township, sometimes broke down even further, to towns, and then broke down even further to wards or other precincts sometimes for really large cities. The 1790 to 1840 census really only gave the names of the heads of households and then the number of free white males and females in various age ranges, and it gave the number of slaves. So if you look at one of those column headings there for those early census records, you'll see the columns for number of males in this age range and another age range. It's limited information. But 1850 and later, then we got the name of every free person in the household and some more information for each individual in the household. And like I said, each decade, more information was provided. So let's take a look here. Here's an 1810 census. And unfortunately in this image, I chopped off the column headings. Bad me. But you could probably line it up with your sheet there for 1810. And you'll see a column for the names over there, and then count marks in the columns that follow for number of males and females, and that type of thing. Over to the end on this one is a column for occupation. So you might not be able to see it, but I see one says Taylor up here, one says Hatter. And that's what the records look like there for those early years. Here's a sample of an 1880 census record. So now we've got a pre-printed form that the census takers are filling out. And you can see way over there in the far column, the names are listed in the households. And then we've got gender and race and age listed, and then relationship to head of household like wife or son, daughter, etc., and occupation, and columns over here for nativity of where were they born, birthplace, that type of information. And likewise for the 1900 one. I wanted to include what the banner looked like up at the top. You can see State of Indiana over in the way upper left corner, and underneath that it says County Sullivan. Here we've got Curry Township. And again, all the information for each individual in the household as they walked door to door for that information. So a lot of the federal census records, you can find them online through Ancestry.com or FamilySearch.org. They're also available in a number of places on microfilm. And don't discount looking at microfilm. I know it sounds very tedious, and that's all we had back in the day, right? But sometimes there's some value in going through and looking at page by page, because you start to see how these neighborhoods were constructed. And remember, people traveled in groups. They traveled in family units. They came from the old country with neighbors and other family members, and they often settled together. So a lot of times it's worth looking through the other pages to get a sense of the neighborhood that they lived in. All right, let's look at state census records. So many states, not all, took a state census, and a lot of them did it in years ending in 5. So whereas the federal census are 1880, 1900, 1910, 1920, blah, 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 these went in years ending in 5. And again, a lot of them are available on Ancestry or FamilySearch.org, and many libraries will have them also. Our own state of Iowa census, we have some partial census that were done in the 1840s and 1850s. They're on microfilm and online at Ancestry. And we have, otherwise, our state of Iowa census for those years are available, 1856, and then 1885, 95, 05, 15, and 25. And we stopped at 25. I've asked why. I've never gotten a good answer. I'm sure it comes down to money. It always comes down to money. Anyways, you can find those online and at Ancestry.com, or you can find them over at the State Historical Society. I do like to point out the 1925 state of Iowa, or Iowa State Census. The 1925 Iowa Census is the only census in the United States that asked each individual for the name of their father and their mother with their mother's maiden name. That's money. Mother's maiden name is money, right? That's good stuff. Because a lot of times we're struggling with that. So if you have an ancestor that was living in 1925, you might be able to, and you're struggling with that mother's maiden name, this might be a place where you can find it. It asks for those parents' names, where they were married, and the ages of those parents if they were still living. The 1925 census is 3 pages long, so you want to be sure to look at all 3 pages when you're looking at it. We're going to see some examples in a minute. They're online and also on film. So here is page 1 for the 1925 census, and it looks very familiar, just like the other ones, with the names listed in that first column there as we go across for information about what do we got? Education and literacy way over here, and some physical descriptions over towards the left. What happens is when you turn the page, the names still are revealed in that far column there, and then you start to see the name of the father, place of birth, age is still living, the name of the mother with maiden name, place of birth, age is if still living, and then marriage location, where were they married. And then page 3 flips over, and there's some more information here for military service and occupation that's listed. So those are the census records. Before we go on to vital records, anyone have any questions about census records? No? Okay. Don't let them intimidate you, just dive in. All right, vital records. So these are the BMDs, the birth, marriage, death records. Content and accessibility can really vary from state to state. Every state has their own rules and laws about these things, and they can be different wherever you're looking for them. Where can they be found? In town, county, and state agencies, on microfilm, in libraries. Some of them are online. Sometimes you might have to go to a county courthouse to see if you can access them. Again, you want to try and find every record, every birth, marriage, and death record for every ancestor. That's what I meant to say. That you can, because sometimes depending on the state, again, there's varied information on them. It's not always the same type of information with every state. It varies. Again, some of the information can be inaccurate because it's a different person writing it down. It's not the original person that it's about. And if you can't find a birth, marriage, and death record, then you might think about some alternative sources. Can I get that same information or close to it with a baptismal record? Because I can't find a birth record. Maybe out of a newspaper announcement about a wedding or that type of thing, or an obituary. Our own Iowa vital records. The event was always recorded at the county first and then sent to the state. 2 copies. Started at the county, copy went to the state. Official registration began in July of 1880, so you're probably not going to find a birth record for that relative born in 1875, but you might find it for the relative born in 1891. Some of the counties were a little slow to adapt or to adopt the law and put it into place. So I can't say it's a hard, fast rule. July 1880, you know, it went out. You need to start. Some of them were a little bit slow. And some of them were even recording before then. There are some county books that have marriages back from 1860 that they've recorded. So, you know, don't like I said, don't let this be a hard rule. It's just kind of a general rule. This is the thing that is confusing here. So by state statute, records are open at the county level with the exception of fetal death, adoptive records, and out-of-wedlock births. So they're available at the county level and open to the public. But at the state level, if you go to the State Historical Society of Iowa to look at them, at the state level, they are closed to the public for 75 years for birth and marriage, and 50 years after the event for death. So yes, it's very confusing, I know. You can go to Marshall County Courthouse and be able to look at you're supposed to have access to a marriage record that occurred where the event occurred in 1982. But if I want to see that same record at the state level, I cannot. I have to wait for 75 years after the event. It used to be 75 years for all, and they just recently changed it to 50 years for death. That's just been changed like in the last 4 years or so that they opened them up. So here's an example of a marriage register that is very common form of what we see for Iowa. And there's some excellent information on here. So the first page is the groom information, and you get his name, his place of residence, his occupation, his age, his birthplace, his mother's name, his father's name, a lot of really good information here. And on the opposite side is the bride's information. Same thing for her. And then the last couple columns is marriage location and who the officiant was and who the witnesses were on there. So a lot of good information in these records here for the state of Iowa. Here's a Missouri death record. A lot of really good information in here. Not only do you, of course, get the deceased name, but you get his residence location, his place of death, her place of death, beg your pardon, her spouse's name, her father's name, her mother's name, the deceased occupation, birthplace, cause of death, of course. What else do we have? Oh, where the cemetery is going to be for the burial, who the funeral home was. Lots of good little pieces here. But then we take a look at Allamakee County in Iowa in 1901, and this is it. This is all you're getting. Remember all that juicy information we had in the prior slide? All we're getting here is name, occupation, age, gender, date of death, and marital status. That's it. You're done. So that's what I mean by it really varies from state to state, can vary a little bit county to county, but it's worth exploring and to look at the original record to get that information. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about family documents and stories. But wait, before I do, I should pause and ask, any question about the vital records that we were looking at? Yeah. You know, I think that, now I'm just speculating with you, that those kids that are doing research to find their biological parents, you know, while they're not able to get to the records, they're finding other means. And some of those other means might be, if I can't get to a birth record, then what are some other ways that births are announced? Church records, if they know a church connection, sometimes the baby is baptized before it's given up for adoption. Sometimes there's newspapers that talk about the birth. Sometimes, you know, because some of these women went home with the baby for a while and then gave the baby up later. So there might be some paper trails out there somewhere that they can trace. And then, of course, there's some people have had success through DNA and doing research that way. Oh. Good questions. I love it. Anyone else? Okay. All right, family documents and stories. So this stuff is typically not in libraries. It might be held by a member of the family. So things like family histories that are not published. Sometimes a family unit, and my family did this, someone in the family put together a little book of what they researched and what they found, and then they did some limits. They went to Kinko's or someplace, you know, and put a little binder on it along with a cookbook or whatever, and, you know, shared it that way. Family Bibles. If the family had a Bible, often there is birth, marriage, and death information in there. Of course, letters, scrapbooks, school records are another good source of information. Awards, funeral cards are an excellent source. You know, my grandma, when she passed away, when she passed away, we were cleaning out the house and I found this shoebox with all these funeral cards in there. I was like, wow. Of course, I found out some of them were just neighbors. They weren't relatives. I didn't know that for a while. But there was a whole bunch of stuff in there with funeral cards. And then, of course, photos. We've talked about photos. If you're lucky enough, they wrote on the back of them of who the people are and maybe the date or the location. You're good. But if there's no one that recognizes the faces, then unfortunately, you're left with a lot of pictures. You know, an interesting thing about photos, some photos, especially if they're taken in a town or a community, and you can see the architecture in the background. And there are ways with Google that you can go out and look for similar architecture structures to help figure out the place. There's clues in there to help you figure out the place and even the time by their dress or their hairstyles and that type of thing. Published family histories. So we talked about the unpublished ones, but there's also some published ones out there, and sometimes you do see these in the libraries and the societies of, the Smith family in Virginia or whatever. You still want to verify that information. There have been books that have been published and distributed with incorrect information in it. So you still want to verify it, what you see in there, and be respectful. Don't plagiarize their work. If you're going to borrow something, give them credit where credit is due. If you're borrowing some information. And places you can find them, like I mentioned, you can find some in some libraries, local libraries, Iowa Genealogical Society library, on Family Search, Google Books. I don't know if you've ever used Google Books. That has, go out there and search Marshall County, Iowa, and there'll be plat books, there'll be history books, there'll be all kinds of books, and you can, do a search then and have the computer search for you for names and places and that type of thing. So unpublished family stories. We talked a little bit about oral histories and writing those down. Family traditions. So you might not think anything about the fact that everybody went to Grandma's house for Christmas and Easter, but as families grow and we get spread out, those things are kind of forgotten about until someone writes it down and said, hey, did you know the whole family used to get together at Grandma's house in Garwin, Iowa, or over in Montour or wherever? That might be some important little piece to know that the family was all together at some place and time. And of course, collected memories. Don't forget to write down your own collected memories. You're doing all this work of putting something together and you're thinking about collecting memories from great-great-grandma or great-great-grandpa. Collect your own about the conversations that you've had with your grandparents. My grandmother, while she was alive, told me a story once about what it was like to celebrate Christmas as a child in their house. And they lived out in Crystal Township up there in Tama County. And it was an incredible story that she talked about the house and gave me an understanding of how the house was constructed. And, it was a German household, so of course they had candles on the tree. And I wanted to know right away, did the tree catch on fire? But it was a great story to learn about and something to share. There's a whole bunch of other records out there that you get information from. We're not going to go through them because we would be here for all night talking about them. But land records, naturalization records, church records, passenger lists, probate letters, court records, city directory, funeral home, all these things are great sources to explore for more information to flesh out your story about your family. All right, let's talk about some warnings and some pitfalls. So these are some real true examples of some problems that I've seen and found. Here's one about of a family tree on Ancestry.com, and I don't know if you've ever been on Ancestry or not, but from someone's tree for a lady named Lottie Louise Irvine, who was born in 1861, those tan rows, those darker rows are the husbands that are listed there. Eli Crosby, Henry Ole Ellis, John Andrews, and William David Pat Pierce. She had 4 husbands and she had some children. But here it shows that Lottie has 4 husbands and 3 of the husbands are similar in ages to her sons. Why would Lottie marry someone that's the same age as her son? Sounds pretty fishy to me. Or maybe she had a passion for younger men. I don't know. Yeah, go get him, girl. Actually, what happened here is that Lottie had a niece also named Lottie Louise Irvine. This particular person fell into what we call the name trap, and they combined Lottie all to be one person instead of creating 2 people. This is a classic example of why you can't trust what's on the internet. This is not correct. Someone fell into a trap here. So here's a little puzzle for us to consider, and this is a real live example of something we've stumbled into. So someone had a person where the date of the birth was, for this individual was in a family Bible, and it was listed as being 1850, but the birth on the census record shows that it was 1854, and the birth on the tombstone is showing as 1851. So what date is correct? What do you guys think? 1850, 1854, 1851. I'm trying to figure out what's really the birth date for this person. What would you pick?
I would say the Bible.
Bible? Okay. Well, and there's some truth in that. So the person that is closer to the event, the more likely the accuracy. Now, if that family Bible was written by, that entry was written by the mother, by God, she knows the date, right? Mom knows the date. But if that entry was written by a distant cousin for that individual, and maybe that cousin, I don't know, where'd they live? In the same town? Maybe they lived far away. Probably not. I don't know how accurate it is. Here's what I would do. Record all of them. Cite your source, where you got that information from. It's likely you can prove or disprove some of those a little bit later, but for the time being, write them all down. In your record, you're probably going to put about 1850 for the time being, and come back to it a little bit later. So I just have one slide about citing sources, but it's an important one, and it's true. It's a pain to do it, but just do it. You will thank me later, because I myself in my family tree right now have 3,500 names, and guess what I did not do with any of them? I don't know where that information came from now. And I've been doing this since 1991. I can't remember where it all came from and how accurate is that date or that location. I'm starting to question it. I have to go back and figure it out now. If you do nothing else, just at least cite or record the information of, if I had to go find this information in 1 month in the future, what do I need to know? Probably the name of the book, the author, the page, maybe the library where I found it, just so that I could go back and find it. Now, if you really want to get into the details, here's a good resource called Evidence Explained by Elizabeth Schoen Mills. She has, I'll call it the Bible on citing sources. And that's sources if it's coming from a book or a microfilm or a movie or a church pamphlet or a tombstone or whatever it is. Or if it's oral history, how do I cite that source? or your own personal recollection. How do I cite that? It's a good book. It's a thick one, but you can find it on like Amazon, and a lot of times the libraries have them too if you just want to check them out. All right, let's get into documenting and organizing, but before I go too far down that rabbit hole, or this one, I mean, any questions about the sources and some of the examples we saw? All right, let's start off with paper and forms. So using paper is still a valid way to do this thing. I mean, people have been doing genealogy for centuries, and they did it with paper. Computers, personal computers haven't been around really that long. We've been doing it on paper for a long time, and it's a good way to get started, too. So think about how you want to organize this stuff. What do you want to use? And how do you want to kind of organize it? You might want to sort it by family and then by generations. And maybe you might want to use some 3-ring binders or file folders. But in combination of those first two items I have listed, you might think, well, let's start with my 4 grandparents, okay? And I'll get 4 notebooks or 4 binders for each one of them. My father's parents, my mother's parents, and I'll just put their last name and the maiden names, of course, on there. And I'll just start filing my documents or my photocopies in there, because you're going to collect a lot of them. And you'll start organizing it that way. And then we'll get to some other forms that maybe you can kind of put them in there. When one of those folders starts to get too big, well, then you're going to have to break it out. And it'll probably make some logical sense to you at that time when you see how big they get and how you want to organize them. There's a lot of different methods on how you can organize. You can do it with colors. You can do it with a numbering system. It goes on and on. If you just Google genealogy organization, you'll find, and paper organization, you'll find a plethora of stuff out there. Of course, if you're using paper documents, you never want to carry the originals with you. Take some copies, or take a quick snapshot on your cell phone if you're going to the library and you want to take that information with you. You might want to think, if you want to invest in some acid-free paper or archival storage boxes, I think we used to call them banker boxes, back in the day. You can get those things at Office Max and the office supply stores. They're not too expensive, or they make good Christmas present ideas. Tell your family, this is what I want. So using paper is a good thing, and you can make a lot of charts out of them. Here's a chart on paper that I took an image of, and it's got a lot of great information here about the descendants of great-grandfather Simon Witten. But it's got some problems. Anyone want to take a guess? What kind of problems do you see? Bingo! There's no dates on there. I don't know if this is 1992, 1892, or 1792. And there's also no places. Is it Germany? Is it Iowa? Is it Yugoslavia? I have no idea. It's missing that. That's why we want to look at some forms. And that's why paper is so helpful. So they help you to record and organize what you know or what you even think you know. Like we talked about the about date for the birth date, what you think you know. Using pedigree and ancestor charts, family group sheets to record the information is really helpful. But you do want to use pencil because you will make some corrections. They help alert you to any missing information. Oh, I forgot that marriage date for this person. And there's a box there for marriage date. They help you alert you to inconsistent information. So I've had this first bullet. Children that were born after the mother's death. That is a physical impossibility. But on my chart, I was showing children born after the mother's death. So obviously I've got a problem I need to fix. Sometimes children that were born, child born when the mother was not of childbearing age. You know, this woman appears to have only been 8 and had children. That's not possible to occur. They just help you to distinguish some of those things. Another thing that's helpful with forms, they help to identify migration patterns. So if you have a family and you see children that were born in Ohio, and then children born in Illinois and children born in Iowa, well, guess what? You might want to check out those other states for some other records, for some more information. And most importantly, like I have down here, they just help you to stay organized. Where can you find these forms? You can just go Google genealogy forms. You'll find them out there, and they're free to download and to print. There's a couple websites that I've listed specifically for Ancestry and Family Search, and also the Mid-Continent Library. But just searching Google for genealogy forms is probably one of your best bets. So let's take a look at pedigree or ancestor charts. And I've passed some of these around, but I wanted to show you that it can come in a lot of different shapes and colors and forms, but it all has basically the same type of information. So I think I sent this one around that looks like this. It says Ancestry.com in the upper right-hand corner. And you're probably familiar with it, but on the far left side is your first person that you're going to list, and maybe that's you. You list your name, the date born, the place born, marriage date, marriage place, and, well, of course, if it's you, there's no death information there, maybe name of spouse. And then father goes up above and mother goes down below is how this is as it's carried on and throughout on the tree. And when you fill out the page and you want to start a new sheet, then you're going to put continued on chart number 2 and start a new chart and number it as number 2 and carry on to be able to show ancestry. So this shows direct lineage back of your ancestors. This one doesn't show siblings, it just shows that direct lineage back. Oh, yeah, that's what I was just saying. Ancestors of the individual. It's that basic core information and the view of the overall parentage. So, pretty simple, right? Questions about the pedigree chart? Okay. Let's look at the next one. The other one is the family group sheet. So this is where it gets a little bit more information, and we start focusing on a family. The other one was showing us ancestry. This one is showing us a family. So this one I think I passed out to you. It says Midwest Genealogy Center in the upper right-hand area. And this one is just focused on the family unit. So you've got the husband's information towards the top, the wife information in the middle, and then you start to list the children down below and some of their core information. So what does it tell and show? It shows that those immediate family members, where did they live, where were they located at, the ages of the individuals, if they were married, might clue you into if anyone's missing. And you want to use one sheet for each marriage. So if you have someone who has more than one spouse, you want to fill out a separate family sheet for that other spouse with the individual, because there could be different sets of kids and that type of thing. And then adopted children, you know, this is a personal choice for people. I would say include them. They're definitely a part of the family unit. There's no hard rule that they can't be or should be, but you know, I would say they're a part of the family unit, so I would include them. And you might make a note if you know it's been a formal or informal adoption. Way back in the day, way back in the day, you know, sometimes a person became a member of the family because maybe it was a neighbor's child and something happened to the parents and they just took them in, and there was no formality taken of an adoption process. Are you folks familiar with the orphan trains that came through? Yeah. So these families on the East Coast that they ship their kids out, you know, for families to take care of them out west and in the Midwest areas, a lot of them. And a lot of them ended up growing up and living out there and never had a connection with that family back east again. You know, that might be where maybe DNA might be a tool to connect to that biological family. But of course, here's the thing. If they didn't have any connection with those people, how is it a family? Is it part of their family? I don't know. That's kind of an individual thing. All right, some rules around using forms. Always record women with their maiden names. If you don't know the maiden name, leave it blank. You'll come back to it later. Dates, I would recommend using this, I call it European style of dates with 2-digit date, 3 alphabetical characters for the month, and 4 digits for the year. This is a problem. You don't know if it's November the 2nd of 1990, 1890, or if it's the 11th of February of whatever year. You don't know. You want to spell it out. And once you get across the ocean to Europe, you're going to be right in sync with what they're typically doing. And then when you're recording your place, always record from smallest to furthest out. If you know that your ancestor was born in Marshall County, then just put Marshall County, Iowa, USA. If you happen to know what the township is, I would put the township and the county and the state and the country. Even though it seems redundant to put USA on the end, I would do it anyways. Because there is a Hamburg, Iowa, and a Hamburg, Germany, right? If you just list Hamburg, who knows? All right, let's talk some about computer software. For those of you that are an Apple user, these are some common software you can buy for family tree recording. Reunion is probably the most popular one. And I did just check these prices here last June of this year. So it's still pretty accurate, from $50 to $99 for those. Those are the websites where you can find them if you want to check them out. Again, just Google the name. Don't worry about spelling out or writing down that web address. Just Google the name and you'll find more than that. If you're a Windows person, these are the ones that are most common. Family Tree Maker, Legacy, Roots Magic. All three are very popular, and those prices are still pretty accurate. You know, a lot of these websites, if you're not sure, a lot of them, they let you download a demo, a free demo, or one that has limited functionality, and you can play with it a little bit and see if you like it. And if you don't, then you're not out anything. And if you do, then you can order the whole thing and pay for it if you want. You own it. You own the software. You own the data. It's on your hard drive of your computer. Yeah. So these are softwares that you load on your computer. And I think what you're getting at is my next screen. So, actually, it's the screen after this. Sorry. So do you have to have a computer for genealogy? No, you don't. Like I said earlier, we've been doing it with paper for centuries, and it works just fine that way. There are some advantages. The computer will organize for you. The computer will sort for you. It does a lot of things for you that make it easy to access. It also makes it easy to share with other people that have computers. And it will also automatically populate those forms for you with the data that you have. So those family group sheets, those pedigree charts, it will just auto-populate it with the information you've collected. I mean, it's still good to print them out and look at them and work with them. You don't get off the hook there. So you don't have to have a computer to do it. So online trees, there's another option here. So some of these subscription sites will allow you to enter your family tree online, and you don't have to put software on your computer for it. Ancestry does, Family Search does, MyHeritage does. There's other ones out there where you can just enter your information into their site. And either you maintain your subscription with them, like you were talking about, or some of them don't have a subscription fee, like FamilySearch.org is not associated with a subscription fee. You don't have to. Now, of course, there's always pros and cons, right, with everything. So some of the pros here: no software to mess with, no maintenance, I don't have to worry about it. It's easily portable. You know, I can look at it on my computer, or I can go to the library and log on to the account at the library and look at it there. Someone else maintains the backups. I don't have to worry about that. Ooh, it provides these cool little hints, these shaky leaves or blue boxes or whatever it is. Now, on the other side of the coin, some of the cons here. You need to check out the user agreement. Do you own that data? It's loaded on their site. They might have the right to be able to sharing that data without your awareness of it. And maybe that's important to you. Some folks it isn't, some folks it is. But be aware of what the user agreement is in there. Some of these places are, everybody's contributing to your tree. It's not just you. Other people have access to make updates also. Now, there are often some measures around there that you have to okay the update often, but some people don't like that. They don't want people in there messing with it and looking at it and stuff. It's available for others to copy. That you might not like that. That all of a sudden, hey, that's my picture. How'd you get my picture on your tree? You didn't ask me permission for that. If that's important to you and you don't want to share that stuff, then this might not be an option for you. Oh, and sometimes these trees have some pretty limited functionality with them. If you buy the software and put it on your computer, you'll get the bells and the whistles because it just comes with it. But some of these trees have some limited functionality. So when using an online tree, you know, I kind of like this advice of this lady. Her name is Lisa Louise Cook. And she's does this thing called Genealogy Gems. It's a podcast. And she has a website called Genealogy Gems. And she's been doing this stuff for years and years and years. But her advice on this is to plant your tree in your own backyard and share branches online. And what she means by that is own your data, invest. This hobby is worth investing in. Get the software, put it on your computer, ask for it as a Christmas present, whatever you want to do. But then you've got your version of your proven tree on your computer, and you can do with it what you want. Now, if you want to upload a little piece of it over to Ancestry so you can get those shaky leaves, or upload it to another website, you can do that. And you can delete it later if you want to. It works well to just kind of have it planted in your own backyard and then share the pieces that you want online. And maybe you want to load the whole thing out there because you want to share it and collaborate with a cousin or something like that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I'm a novice myself when it comes to DNA. And you know, what they're looking at is they're looking to match DNA with other individuals, and they base it on kind of comes down to the percentage of match. So If you have a lot of matching DNA, then it's probably with someone who's in an immediate family area. It could be a parent, could be a sibling, or it might be an aunt and uncle, someone that's pretty close. But as you get less and less percentage of match, then you start getting into the third cousins and the fourth cousins and the fifth cousins reign. It doesn't tell you how you're connected. It just tells you that you're likely connected. It's just another tool to use to help you in your search. It doesn't give you an answer. You still have to do some research to prove it and figure out the connection that you're related. So, and sometimes, even if you know you're related to a person, but you can't find matching DNA with them, it doesn't mean you're not related. It's just that as these genes from generation combine, you're getting a different mix of half from your father and half from your mother each time it happens. And it's not always the same set of DNA that's passed on. That's why you're not an identical to your sibling. You got a different set, and it changes with each generation. So you might not have a matching piece from that full-blooded Cherokee great-grandma. You might not have gotten that piece of DNA. So there's study about Y chromosomal matches, X chromosomal matches, mitochondrial DNA, and the different types of matching. And that's what the special interest group talks about. So become a member, come down to the special interest group, learn about DNA. They know a lot more than I do. So, in short here and in closing, remember why you're doing this. Have fun. You get to learn something about your family, and you might even connect with some lost members, discover some stories, share with them. Think about it here. This is history on a personal level. Really, truly it is. If you think about those pedigree charts that show the ancestors branching out in the tree, flip it around the other way. What have you got? You got this sea of people, different places and time, and it all funnels down to you. This is a story about you and how you came to this place and this time and maybe this job, and who knows, maybe it figured into how you met your spouse or the love of your life. I don't know. It is about you and your place in history. So.